Alexander White dedicated his life to constructing an empire, meticulously overseeing every facet of his domain with exactitude. He was the sort of man who had little faith in surprises, until the moment two 10-year-old boys entered a luxury hotel, met his gaze directly, and uttered 4 words that dismantled all his preconceived notions. "You are our creator." In that instant, the billionaire CEO's meticulously crafted existence fell apart, presenting him with a question he had never contemplated before. What if the most significant creation he had was not success? Alexander White had grown accustomed to opulence. As the leader of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, he had dedicated years to refining his existence, making certain that every detail operated precisely as he envisioned. His time held great worth, his agenda meticulously organized, and his realm devoid of unexpected events. As he stepped into the lobby of the esteemed Grand Meridian Hotel in New York, his thoughts were consumed by the intricacies of his forthcoming business meetings, oblivious to the fact that his entire life was on the brink of a dramatic shift. The marble floors of the hotel shimmered beneath the glow of the chandelier lights, while the soft murmur of conversations among affluent guests intertwined effortlessly with the classical melodies drifting through the air. As Alex neared the reception desk, ready to check into his penthouse suite, a voice from behind him caught his attention. Hesitant, yet filled with resolve. "Mr. White." At first, he hardly acknowledged the voice, thinking it belonged to a hotel staff member. Yet there was something in its tone that compelled him to look back. Just a short distance away stood 2 boys, no older than 10, strikingly identical in every aspect, with dark brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and expressions that blended nervousness with determination. Their attire was tidy yet evidently not costly, and one of them held onto a frayed backpack as if it were his most prized possession. Alex furrowed their brow, perplexed by the unexpected company. Indeed, he responded, his tone steady yet cautious. The boys shared a glance, a silent agreement passing between them about who would break the silence. At last, the individual with the backpack took a step forward. "We need to have a conversation," he stated, his tone more composed than Alex anticipated for someone so young. Alex surveyed the lobby, catching sight of a handful of inquisitive looks from other guests nearby. He was completely unaware of the identities of these children or the reason they were speaking to him so openly. Yet there was something in their faces that made him uneasy. "I apologize, but have we met before?" The second boy, previously quiet, inhaled deeply and locked eyes with Alex, unflinching. "We are your children." After years of eloquence, Alexander White found himself at a loss for words. The clamor of the lobby receded into the distance as his mind grappled with the weight of what he had just learned. Children. That was utterly unfeasible. He was childless. He had always remained single, and he had certainly never found himself in a scenario where he would have brought 2 boys into the world without being aware of it. Time lingered, and as silence stretched on, the first boy pressed on with his words. "Our mother. She left us a few weeks ago. Prior to her passing, she revealed your identity to us." Alex experienced a sudden, unanticipated shiver coursing through him. Their manner of speaking held a certain allure, a self-assuredness in their expressions that rendered any attempt to disregard them nearly impossible. His instincts whispered that this was genuine, yet the rational side of his mind clung stubbornly to doubt. "Who was your mother?" he inquired, his tone now subdued. "Lillian Brooks," the second boy responded without hesitation. The name struck him with the force of a blow to the stomach. He had not considered Lillian in almost 10 years, yet the mention from these boys who asserted they were his offspring brought a rush of memories to the forefront. They had shared a brief yet passionate connection, one of those vibrant, ephemeral romances that shone brilliantly before extinguishing suddenly. She was vibrant and generous, yet their realities were simply too disparate. She departed in silence, and he never laid eyes on her again. The fragments began to align in unsettling ways. The schedule, the age of the boys. He could no longer overlook their likeness to him now that he was genuinely observing them. A constriction gripped his chest. Why didn't she tell me? He wondered, speaking more to himself than to anyone else. The lad with the knapsack shrugged. We are uncertain. She said you were our father, and now she's no longer here. We found ourselves without any other options. Alex rubbed his face, letting out a sharp breath. This seemed unthinkable, and yet, there they stood before him, compelling him to reevaluate all that he believed about his history. He found himself grappling with a disquieting thought. Was it more disturbing that they could be speaking the truth, or the stark awareness that if they were, he had overlooked a decade of their lives, completely unaware of their existence? "Join me," he finally declared, his tone unwavering yet resolute. The boys shared a knowing look before nodding together in agreement. Alex guided them to the elevator, his thoughts swirling with countless unanswered questions. If they were being honest, if Lillian had concealed this from him all these years, then his life was on the brink of transformation in ways he could never have anticipated. For the first time in his meticulously curated existence, Alexander White found himself utterly uncertain about what would unfold next. The ascent to the penthouse unfolded in quietude, punctuated only by the soft ding of the elevator as it glided past each level. Alex lingered with his hands tucked away, casting furtive looks at the boys next to him. With the opportunity to truly observe them, the similarity was unmistakable. The distinct contours of their faces, the subtle furrow of their brows when lost in contemplation, and their poised, attentive stance as they absorbed the world around them, all echoed his own demeanor. It was disquieting. As the elevator doors slid apart, Alex ushered them into his penthouse, a stylish, contemporary haven adorned with expansive windows that framed a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The boys lingered at the threshold, their eyes roaming across the immaculate furnishings, the meticulously curated decor, the stark sophistication of the room. It was evident that no children had ever called this place home. The space was devoid of scattered toys, lacking any hints of warmth or disorder. It was merely a residence crafted for a man who had devoted years to placing work above all else. "Step inside," Alex invited, gesturing for them to enter. He strolled into the kitchen, retrieving a bottle of water from the fridge before pivoting to confront them. "It's best to begin at the start. What led you to discover me?" The boy with the backpack, whom Alex was beginning to think was the more vocal of the pair, unzipped it and retrieved a small envelope. He set it down on the counter and pushed it gently in Alex's direction. "This was left for us by Mom." With a moment of uncertainty, Alex reached for it. He gripped the paper a bit more firmly as he carefully opened the letter within. The handwriting was undeniably Lillian's, tidy, gently slanted, with a particular grace that he had always admired. "Greetings, Alex. If this message finds you, it means I have departed, and Jake and Oliver are in search of you. I understand you likely have countless inquiries, and I truly wish I could be the one to provide the answers. Honestly, I decided quite some time back that I wouldn't share this with you. You were crafting your destiny, and I didn't want to be the one to interfere with it. I assured myself that my decision was justified, believing the boys would be better off without a father who was too preoccupied for their presence. However, I realize now that I was mistaken. It is essential for them to understand your identity, just as it is vital for you to understand theirs. They are wonderful young people, Alex. Intelligent, compassionate, more resilient than one might expect. Now they rely solely on you, *. I trust you will treat them well." Lillian Alex exhaled slowly, his fingers gripping the letter tightly before he gently placed it down. He found himself torn between two sources of frustration: the realization that Lillian had withheld them from him for a decade, and the unsettling truth that she had been correct all along. Had she revealed it to him at that time, would he have been prepared? Would he have taken the initiative? Or might he have persuaded himself that his professional ambitions took precedence over nurturing two children? His throat constricted as he gazed up at the boys, his sons, Jake and Oliver. The burden of it all pressed down firmly on his heart. "Since her departure, you've navigated this journey alone." His voice had softened, losing some of the control he preferred. At last Oliver, the more reserved of the two, found his voice. "We resided with a neighbor for some time, but she was unable to continue hosting us. We decided to escape when social workers threatened to place us in foster care." His voice remained calm, Yet there was an unmistakable glint in his eyes, a hint of caution, a shielded vulnerability. Alex brushed his hand across his face. You fled. Are you aware of the risks involved in that? Jake raised his chin just a bit, showing his defiance. It was preferable to being apart. That struck Alex more deeply than he anticipated. The thought of them being separated, thrown into a system that was indifferent to their existence, sent a chill deep into his heart. He let out a breath, attempting to make sense of it all. At last, he gave a nod of agreement. Understood. Jake's brow furrowed ever so slightly. Understood. You're staying here, Alex stated plainly, as though it were the most evident truth imaginable. The boys shared a look, doubt dancing in their eyes. In an instant, Oliver inquired. Alex rested against the counter, arms crossed in a thoughtful pose. Just like that, you mentioned that you had no other place to turn. Now you possess it. For an extended silence, neither of them uttered a word. Then, gradually, Jake inclined his head, as though coming to terms with the reality of the situation. Oliver trailed behind a moment later. With a deep inhalation, Alex steadied himself. He was completely lost, utterly unsure of how to navigate the challenges of raising two 10-year-olds. Yet one thing was crystal clear to him. He would never let them slip away. Not at this moment. Never. Alex had always been a person who flourished in the realm of control. He constructed his existence with a foundation of structure, reason, and meticulous strategy. Yet, for the first time in years, he sensed an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. In just under a day since Jake and Oliver entered his world, an unmistakable shift had occurred, leaving everything feeling transformed. The following morning, he rose earlier than he typically would, not due to an alarm or an impending meeting, but because the stillness of the penthouse seemed more oppressive than ever. He had always found comfort in silence, even favored it, yet now, with two children resting just down the hall, the quiet felt unsettling. He rose, slipped on a t-shirt, and ventured into the hallway, halting just outside the guest room where they had spent the previous night. The door stood a fraction open. He eased the door open and discovered the room largely undisturbed, save for the two backpacks resting by the bed. The bed lay vacant. His heart raced as he faced the living room, his thoughts spiraling into the depths of dread. What would happen if they had departed? What if they chose not to remain in the company of someone unfamiliar, who seemed uncertain in their actions? Yet, the moment he entered the expansive area of the penthouse, his eyes fell upon them. The two boys sat cross-legged on the floor, their attention focused on the coffee table as they enjoyed their bowls of cereal in serene silence. Jake was channel surfing with the remote, while Oliver sat cross-legged, deeply engrossed in a book. As he entered, both of them shifted their gaze toward him. "You're up early," Jake remarked before shifting his attention back to the television. Alex exhaled, a release of tension he hadn't been aware of until that moment. "Indeed, you are as well." Oliver gave a nonchalant shrug. "We have grown accustomed to rising early." Alex brushed his fingers along the nape of his neck. He felt uncertain about the proper procedure in this situation. Should he have inquired about their sleep quality? Should they require anything? He found himself uncertain about what children typically consumed for breakfast, yet it seemed they had already come to their own conclusions. He entered the kitchen, casting a quick look at the cereal box perched on the counter. "You all just took matters into your own hands." Jake regarded him with an arched eyebrow. "We never expected you to take to the kitchen." Alex wore a subtle smirk. "Excellent decision." He filled a cup with coffee and rested against the counter, observing them intently. It was peculiar, this sensation of uncertainty about what lay ahead. He had a knack for entering meetings with a strategy, consistently anticipating the moves of those around him. Yet with Jake and Oliver, he navigated each moment, uncertain of the best course of action. He finally said, "I thought today we could pick up a few things for you. Apparel, educational materials, anything else you require." Jake cast a wary glance in his direction. "No one is there to handle that for you." Alex let out a laugh through his nose, finding it amusing. "I certainly do. However, I thought you might prefer to choose your own items." Oliver placed his book aside and observed him intently. Are we heading to school? Alex took a moment to reflect. That was an idea that had yet to cross his mind. He understood they had likely missed a significant amount of school, given all they had experienced, but the thought of enrolling them, formalizing it, suddenly intensified the reality of the situation. Indeed, he replied after a brief pause. Let's proceed gradually, one step at a time. The boys shared another look, a wordless agreement hanging in the air as they weighed the prospect of a disagreement. At last, Jake merely shrugged and returned to his cereal. Later that morning, Alex led them to a bustling department store in the heart of downtown. He had always navigated the world of high-end suits and luxury watches, so wandering through the aisles of children's clothing felt like venturing into an entirely unfamiliar realm. The boys, on the other hand, appeared to be fully aware of their actions. They chose jeans, hoodies, sneakers, basic, functional items. They steered clear of anything ostentatious or costly, and Alex observed how frequently they glanced at the price tags before placing an item in the cart. There's no need to fret about the price, he remarked, observing their uncertainty as they deliberated over a pair of sneakers. Jake cast a fleeting look in his direction. This is unfamiliar territory for us. Alex's brow furrowed ever so slightly. He understood they had grown up simply with their mother, yet their carefulness with finances at such a young age caused a tightness in his chest. He wanted them to feel free to express themselves fully. You're not going to lose your mind and grab 10 pairs of shoes, he said. But you also don't need to behave as if I'm going to snatch it all away if you choose something lovely. Jake paused for a moment, then ultimately agreed, reaching for the sneakers he desired. Following their shopping excursion, they paused at a quaint diner for a midday meal. The boys had settled into a more subdued atmosphere, yet it felt perfectly comfortable. They seemed to be navigating this new reality, much like he was. As they dined, Alex observed them intently, noticing their subtle distinctions. Jake was the more vocal one, consistently the first to chime in, always armed with a keen remark or inquiry. Oliver exhibited a calm demeanor, often taking in his surroundings with a thoughtful gaze, preferring to reflect before voicing his thoughts. It was peculiar how swiftly Alex could recognize fragments of his own identity in each of them. Do you all want to do something else today? He inquired, setting down his coffee cup. Oliver appeared deep in contemplation. Could we visit a bookstore? Alex blinked, taken aback. A haven for book lovers. Oliver gave a slight nod. Mom would often take us along. Alex found himself unexpectedly affected by that moment. For years, he had been unaware of their existence, and now, out of nowhere, there were these tiny details, fragments of their lives that he had never experienced. He had overlooked their initial words, their first steps, their birthdays. He was absent during the moments when their mother shared bedtime tales, when she guided them through bookstores, when she molded them into their true selves. Yet he was present at this moment. Perhaps that was the essence of it all. Indeed, he replied, giving a nod. A visit to a bookstore sounds delightful. Jake wore a sly grin. You don't strike me as someone who spends much time with books. Alex let out a soft laugh. I engage with literature, simply not for enjoyment. For the first time that day, Oliver smiled. Perhaps we can discover something to alter that. Alex found himself uncertain about the kind of father he ought to become. He lacked the solutions, had no guidebook for navigating this correctly. As he sat there with his sons, he came to understand that it was okay not to have everything figured out immediately. He merely had to be present. For the time being, that sufficed. Alex had consistently adhered to a structured way of life. Each segment of his day was meticulously arranged, from the instant he opened his eyes to the very moment he closed them at night. His existence centered on meticulous planning, optimal performance, and mastery over every detail. However, with two 10-year-olds now residing in his home, the life he had meticulously built was starting to change in unforeseen ways. The initial significant change was the sound. His penthouse had always been a sanctuary of silence, a refuge for contemplation free from interruptions, where the only sounds were the distant hum of the city beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows and the rare beep of his phone. Footsteps echoed down the hall, dishes clattered as the boys prepared their own breakfasts, and muffled sounds of laughter and playful bickering drifted from the other room. He was unaware of the profound stillness that had enveloped his existence until their arrival. One morning, as he entered the kitchen, he discovered Jake perched on one of the chairs, stretching to grab the cereal from the top shelf where Alex stored it. Oliver lingered close, arms folded, his expression revealing a distinct lack of enthusiasm for his brother's approach. "You're bound to fall," Oliver remarked, observing him grapple with the challenge. Jake dismissed him, extending his reach even more. "I have it figured out." Alex propped himself against the counter, an eyebrow arched in curiosity. "It might be beneficial to seek assistance." Jake whipped his head around, taken aback, and almost stumbled. Alex caught his arm just in time, preventing him from falling and gently placing him back on the floor. Jake let out a frustrated sigh. "I reached my limit." "Of course you did," Alex replied with a smirk, before reaching up to grab the cereal box and passing it over to him. Oliver wore a sly grin. "I mentioned it before." While the boys enjoyed their meal at the counter, Alex filled a cup with coffee and took a seat opposite them. He observed them intently, grappling with the realization that mere days prior, they were completely unknown to him. Now they had woven themselves into the fabric of his everyday existence. They occupied his space in a manner that felt both unfamiliar and oddly instinctive. Jake shattered the stillness. "What do you spend your time on throughout the day?" Alex arched an eyebrow. "Could you clarify what you mean?" "You constantly glance at your phone, wearing a thoughtful expression. Is your role simply that of a businessman?" Alex wore a sly grin. "Exactly." Oliver lifted his gaze. "Are you fond of it?" The inquiry caused Alex to hesitate. He had never been posed that question before. Throughout his entire existence, his professional journey revolved around ascending further, accumulating wealth, and achieving victory. He never paused to consider if he genuinely enjoyed it. He finally admitted that he excels at it. Jake reclined in his chair. "That is not equivalent." Alex observed him, a hint of admiration in his gaze. "No, it isn't." The dialogue meandered from that point onward, yet the inquiry lingered in Alex's mind. Did he truly find joy in the life he had crafted, or had he merely persuaded himself that achievement equated to fulfillment? He set the thought aside. He had more pressing matters to address, such as determining how to spend the day with the boys. "As you'll be here for an extended period, we should arrange a few things," he mentioned. "Academics, extracurriculars, possibly athletics. Anything you guys are interested in." Jake gave a nonchalant shrug. "I once played baseball." Oliver gave a slight nod. "Art captivates me." Alex took a moment to remember. "Understood. First, we will explore educational institutions, and afterward we will consider options for sports and art classes." Jake squinted, his gaze sharp and focused. "It seems you might be struggling with this, am I right?" Alex huffed a quiet laugh. "Not at all." Oliver inclined his head. "So what's motivating your efforts?" That question resonated more profoundly with Alex than anticipated. He could have effortlessly brought someone on board to take care of everything. Individuals such as tutors, nannies, and assistants, those who truly understood the art of caring for children. Yet, he was reluctant to pass them on to another. He had already spent a decade with them. He refused to let anything slip away from him again. "Because you are my sons," he stated plainly. The boys shared fleeting looks, their faces betraying nothing. It was evident they were unaccustomed to such words. Perhaps they were still uncertain about their faith in him. Following breakfast, they dedicated the day to exploring various schools. Alex had always believed that selecting a school was simply about opting for the one with the highest reputation. Yet, as he observed the boys navigating the campuses, it dawned on him that the situation was far more complex. They weren't impressed by massive libraries or high-tech classrooms. They focused on aspects he hadn't thought about, such as the kindness of the teachers, the presence of a baseball field, and the availability of an art program that Oliver could truly appreciate. Ultimately, he allowed them to make the choice. They chose a school that wasn't the priciest or most renowned, but one that resonated with them. Alex had always been the one to take charge of his own choices, but this time, he found himself surprisingly at ease with letting someone else take the reins. As night fell and the boys prepared for sleep, Alex strolled by their rooms and caught snippets of their conversation. He hadn't intended to listen in, yet their voices drifted through the slightly ajar door with unmistakable clarity. "Do you believe he's being genuine?" Jake inquired. "I'm not sure," Oliver confessed, yet he chose to allow us to remain. A moment of silence hung in the air before Jake let out a heavy sigh. "We'll just have to wait and find out." Alex lingered for a moment, then turned and walked away silently. He dedicated his whole life to demonstrating his worth in the business world, revealing to others that he was competent, dependable, and influential. Yet, for the first time, he understood he possessed another challenge to conquer. He needed to show his sons that he was here to stay. The initial days with Jake and Oliver were a bit of a transition, yet Alex soon understood that adapting to this new reality required more than merely arranging their rooms and selecting a school. The boys exhibited politeness and respect, yet an unbridgeable gap lingered, an unseen barrier forged from years of unfamiliarity. They had spent a lifetime without him, and despite his deep desire to mend what was broken, trust was not a foundation that could be established in an instant. That morning, as he entered the kitchen, he discovered Oliver perched at the counter, immersed in sketching within a notebook. His brow knitted in deep thought, his pencil gliding effortlessly over the paper. Jake stood before the open fridge, gazing into its depths as if he were expecting something to materialize before his eyes. "Will you be standing there all morning, or will you finally make a choice?" Alex inquired, propping himself against the counter while cradling his coffee. Jake tilted his head ever so slightly. "I am contemplating." Alex wore a sly grin. "Your thoughts are quite profound for someone with such a consistent daily menu." Jake sighed dramatically and snatched a yogurt, while Oliver remained engrossed in his sketching, completely absorbed in his own universe. Alex's eyes flicked over the paper, taking in the intricate depiction of the city skyline. "You've got some talent," Alex remarked, glancing at the sketchbook. Oliver glanced upward, his face a mask of ambiguity, then gave a slight shrug. "My mother was my teacher." Alex experienced that all too familiar twinge of remorse each time the boys brought up their mother. He loathed the realization of all the moments in their lives that had slipped through his fingers. He was unaware of Lillian's qualities as a mother, yet he felt certain she had been a good one. She had nurtured them to be self-sufficient, intelligent, and significantly more mature than their peers. Alex remarked that she must have felt a sense of pride in you. Oliver paused for a moment, then offered a slight nod. "She often expressed that with enough dedication, I could achieve anything." Alex sipped his coffee, observing him intently. She was right. Oliver appeared taken aback, as though such words were a rarity for him, reserved only for his mother. Jake, absorbed in his meal, unexpectedly broke the silence. "How about you? What lessons did your parents impart to you?" The inquiry took Alex by surprise. His parents weren't the type to gather him for heartfelt discussions about life. His father had been merciless in his dealings and anticipated the same from him, while his mother had consistently prioritized social status over nurturing. He dedicated the majority of his life to demonstrating his worth to them, ensuring he never stumbled, for in the White family, failure was simply not an option. Alex stated plainly that they instilled in him the value of hard work. Jake observed him intently. "That's all there is to it." Alex placed his coffee on the table. That was what held significance for them. Oliver inclined his head ever so slightly. "Is that what holds significance for you?" Alex found himself at a loss for words. Throughout his life, he had pursued success relentlessly, focusing on building his company, amassing wealth, and ensuring that he never displayed any signs of vulnerability. As he sat here, observing the two boys who were his sons yet felt like unfamiliar faces, he found himself questioning whether the things he once held dear truly held the significance he had always believed. He confessed that he once held that belief. However, circumstances evolve. Jake held back from probing deeper, yet the intensity of his gaze on Alex revealed that he was still in the process of unraveling his complexities. Later that afternoon, Alex chose to bring them to a sports complex where he held a membership. The facility exuded luxury, designed for elite athletes and executives seeking unparalleled access to top-tier equipment. Months had passed since his last visit, yet it was the first idea that sprang to mind when he considered how to entertain two lively 10-year-olds. Upon their arrival, Jake's eyes sparkled with excitement at the view of the baseball field. "We can engage in some fun activities here." Alex gave a slight nod. "Indeed. You mentioned that you used to play, correct?" Jake smiled broadly. "Indeed, but never in a place quite like this." Oliver, on the other hand, found himself captivated by the basketball court. Though he didn't display the same exuberance as Jake, Alex noticed the spark of curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You all have the freedom to choose," Alex remarked. "Please ensure that nothing gets damaged." Jake sprinted off to the batting cages, while Oliver meandered toward the court, casually dribbling a ball as he went. Alex perched on the bleachers, observing them, a sense of disconnection washing over. He had a knack for steering board meetings, brokering contracts, and making decisions worth millions. Yet, as he sat there, observing his children simply being themselves, he came to understand just how foreign this world felt to him. Eventually, Jake approached, breathing a bit heavily. "Engage in the game." Alex arched an eyebrow. "Is it baseball?" "It hasn't happened since I was your age." Jake threw him a glove. "Let's find out if you have what it takes." With a resigned sigh, Alex rose to his feet, easing the tension in his shoulders. "Very well. However, if I find myself in an embarrassing situation, this will be a topic we never revisit." Jake wore a sly grin. "Agreed." To his own astonishment, Alex found that he wasn't half bad. He wasn't exceptional, but he had the skills to catch and throw adequately to stay in the game with Jake. Oliver finally participated, and for the first time since their arrival, Alex witnessed genuine laughter, not merely polite smiles or faint smirks. At one moment, Alex noticed Jake looking at him with an expression that seemed to convey a hint of approval. It may have been small, yet it marked the beginning. When they finally departed, the boys were worn out yet filled with joy. Once they settled into the car, Jake glanced over at Alex. Today had its moments. Alex wore a sly grin. "That's the kindest compliment you've given me yet." Jake gave a casual shrug. "You're in the process of discovering your path. Yet you are making an effort." Oliver gave a thoughtful nod, signaling his agreement. "Indeed, and that exceeds our expectations." Alex found himself uncertain whether that was intended to uplift him or deepen his unease. He understood that the journey to earn their complete trust was still ahead of him, yet he felt a sense of advancement. As they made their way back to the penthouse, Alex caught himself stealing glances at them in the rearview mirror. Perhaps he wasn't the father they required at that moment, but for the first time in his existence, he was open to growth. The following days were marked by subtle yet significant changes. Alex had dedicated years to solitude, embracing the quiet, the structured routine, and a life centered on professional pursuits. He was gradually getting used to the presence of two 10-year-olds in his penthouse, which brought with it a cacophony of noise, a sense of unpredictability, and an expanding list of considerations he had never encountered before. This included ensuring there was food they actually enjoyed, navigating their school enrollment, and understanding what it truly meant to be accountable for someone beyond his own needs. One evening, after a long day at the office, he stepped into the penthouse to discover the boys gathered in the living room. Oliver lounged on the couch, pencil in hand, lost in the world of his sketches, while Jake sprawled on the floor, engrossed in the baseball game playing out on the enormous screen. Snack wrappers lay discarded on the coffee table. A lone sock rested near the couch, and a backpack sat ajar, its school forms tumbling out in disarray. It was chaotic, yet oddly enough, Alex found himself devoid of the typical annoyance he would have experienced in the past. With a heavy sigh, he placed his briefcase on the ground. Jake hardly acknowledged him. "You seem weary." Alex wore a sly grin. "Is that really so clear?" Oliver lifted his gaze from the pages of his sketchpad. "You put in a lot of hours." "That's the reality of managing a business," Alex remarked, loosening his tie. Jake arched an eyebrow. Have you ever considered exploring other options? Alex let out a soft laugh, settling into the armchair. What do you mean? Jake gave a nonchalant shrug. I'm uncertain. Something enjoyable. Alex inclined his head ever so slightly. He dedicated his whole adult life to cultivating his enterprise, striving relentlessly with every year that went by. Enjoyment hadn't been at the top of his list. Even during his journeys, they were solely for professional purposes. Even when he attended events, they served as calculated chances for networking. It had been ages since he had engaged in an activity purely for the joy of it. What do you all find enjoyable? He inquired. Jake wore a sly grin. Clearly, baseball. Oliver rhythmically drummed his pencil on the sketch pad, lost in thought. Engaging in activities that bring you joy, like immersing yourself in a good book or expressing creativity through drawing. Alex pondered over that. His existence was a whirlwind of activity, perpetually strategizing for the future, never pausing to savor the moment at hand. Perhaps that was the reason this entire scenario with the boys seemed so foreign. He had never truly taken the time to understand what life beyond his professional obligations was meant to be. A sudden idea flashed through his mind. Have either of you ever visited an amusement park? Jake's eyes grew wide with surprise, just like the genuine article, featuring thrilling roller coasters. Alex gave a slight nod. Oliver shook his head in disbelief. Mom was always too busy to take us. Alex inclined his body, eager and attentive. At this moment, I find myself with some free time. What do you think about heading out this weekend? Jake appeared doubtful. And you? Visiting an amusement park? What, are you wearing a three-piece suit? Alex wore a sly grin. I do have regular clothes, you know. Oliver chuckled. I'll trust it when I witness it firsthand. As the weekend approached, Alex had meticulously planned a trip for them to explore one of the biggest amusement parks located just beyond the city limits. He anticipated chaos, crowds, and fatigue, and indeed that was the reality. Yet, he found himself pleasantly surprised by the enjoyment it brought him. With boundless enthusiasm, Jake dashed forward, eager for each thrilling ride, pulling Oliver along in his wake. They began with a thrilling roller coaster featuring several loops, and to his own astonishment, Alex discovered he was joining in on the adventure. The experience was swift and bewildering, something he would never have opted for alone. Yet, as he disembarked and caught sight of the boys' beaming smiles, he understood that he had no regrets. As the day unfolded, they explored various rides, engaged in games at the carnival booths, and took a moment to enjoy lunch at one of the rather pricey food stands. Jake snagged a stuffed bear at the basketball shooting game and promptly passed it to Oliver, who let out a sigh but accepted it nonetheless. As they stood in line for yet another ride, Oliver glanced at Alex and remarked, Mom would have enjoyed this. Alex cast a fleeting look in his direction. Indeed, Oliver gave a slight nod. She consistently encouraged us to find joy, even in challenging times. Alex gulped, the knot in his throat tightening. He had devoted countless hours reflecting on what he had overlooked, what he had failed to witness. Yet perhaps what truly held significance was his current actions. That evening, once they got back home, the boys fell asleep almost right away, worn out from the long day. Alex lingered in the hallway, gazing at the closed doors, acutely aware of the stark transformation his life had undergone in a remarkably brief period. He had entered that hotel weeks prior, believing he was merely a businessman, a figure who managed every detail of his existence with meticulous care. At this point, he found himself the father of two boys, who had transformed him in ways he never anticipated. After an extended period, his mind was finally free from the burdens of work. He found himself lost in thoughts of them. Adapting to life with Jake and Oliver unfolded gradually. Yet with each passing day, Alex discovered deeper insights into the essence of fatherhood. It went beyond merely providing food, clothing, or shelter. It revolved around the subtle details, like the way Oliver would unconsciously tap his pencil on the table while lost in thought, how Jake consistently pushed the boundaries of every rule just to gauge whether Alex would truly uphold them, and the manner in which they both paused before making requests, as if they were uncertain about their entitlement to do so. One evening, Alex found himself home earlier than usual, a choice he would have never made prior to the arrival of the boys in his life. As he entered the penthouse, he spotted Oliver comfortably settled on the couch, engrossed in a book, while Jake sprawled on the floor, playfully tossing a baseball into the air and catching it with ease. A faint aroma of burnt toast hung in the air, and as Alex turned his gaze toward the kitchen, he noticed a plate of half-eaten sandwiches resting on the counter. "Did you all give cooking a try?" Alex inquired, arching an eyebrow. Oliver remained engrossed in his book, oblivious to the world around him. "We crafted a delightful grilled cheese." Jake smiled broadly. Primarily, with a sly grin, Alex strolled over to examine the chaos they had created. "I take it that the initial attempts were largely unsuccessful." Jake propped himself up. "It seems Oliver overlooked the essential step of buttering the bread first." Oliver cast him a glance. "I remember. I simply wasn't aware." Alex chuckled softly, a smile playing on his lips. "Let me remind you to learn the proper way to use the stove before any accidents happen." Jake extended his arms back, a relaxed posture settling over him. "Do you really cook?" Alex rested against the counter. "I understand the way. Time always seems to slip away from me." Oliver cast a fleeting look in his direction. "Now is your moment." The unexpected words took Alex by surprise. He dedicated his whole life to occupying every moment of his agenda with tasks, believing that time was his greatest treasure. For the first time, he found himself compelled to slow down, caught in a conflict between his disdain for it and a budding realization of its significance. After a brief pause, he replied, "I suppose I do. Perhaps I can share some knowledge with you both that doesn't include the art of toasting bread to a crisp." Jake wore a sly grin. "That seems like quite the endeavor." The following day, Alex took an unprecedented step. He called off a meeting to ensure he could return home in time to prepare dinner with the boys. He kept it to himself, partly because he was uncertain about whether he would actually go through with it. However, as he entered the room with a bag of groceries in hand rather than his typical briefcase, their astonishment was unmistakable. "You truly intended it?" Jake inquired, observing Alex place the bag on the counter. Alex pushed up his sleeves. "Did you really think I was just playing around?" Oliver rose from the couch, a hint of admiration flickering across his face. "Absolutely, indeed." Alex wore a sly grin. "Prepare to discover that I never play games." He may not have been a culinary master, but he possessed just enough skill to manage. He guided them in the art of crafting pasta from the very beginning, demonstrating the techniques of kneading the dough, rolling it out and slicing it into strips. Initially, Jake was captivated by the challenge of covering the counter in flour, while Oliver dedicated himself to perfecting the shapes with great concentration. Alex discovered a newfound sense of patience, guiding them through each step, addressing their inquiries, and observing as they gradually began to understand. As they gathered around the table, savoring the fruits of their labor, Jake reclined in his chair, a sense of contentment washing over him. "All right, I'll confess. That turned out to be quite enjoyable." Oliver gave a slight nod. "It has a superior flavor compared to the packaged variety." Alex wore a sly grin. "As a result of your own efforts." Jake observed him intently for a brief moment before placing his fork aside. "I must admit, you're proving to be better at this than I initially expected." Alex arched an eyebrow. In the kitchen, Jake gave a nonchalant shrug. "Everything." His tone carried a certain hesitance, as if he were uncertain about voicing his thoughts aloud. Alex quickly realized that Jake was the kind of person who would put others to the test before extending his trust. He was curious to find out whether Alex would remain, if he truly meant it, or if it was merely a fleeting moment. "I told you," Alex said, maintaining his stare, "I'm here to stay." Without uttering a word, Jake paused for a moment before giving a subtle nod. That sufficed. After dinner, Oliver lingered at the table, diligently sketching in his notebook as Jake casually flipped through channels on the TV. Alex gazed out the window, contemplating the city's transformation and the swift passage of time. Not long ago, his existence had followed a steady, manageable path. At this point, it was brimming with uncertainty, chaos, and instances like this, small yet significant. He felt uncertain about whether he was on the right path. It's likely he wasn't. For the first time, he found his thoughts extending beyond his own concerns. He found himself lost in thoughts of them, and that surely held significance. The weeks that followed unfolded in a manner that was both refreshing and oddly familiar. Initially, Alex anticipated that the shift would prove to be more challenging, fearing that the boys might oppose his involvement in their lives, or that he would find it hard to connect with them. Yet, gradually, without his awareness, they had found their groove. Mornings transformed into a time of reflection rather than a frantic dash to the office. Now, they ensured that Jake and Oliver were fully prepared for school, verifying whether Oliver had packed his sketchbook and gently reminding Jake not to leave behind his baseball glove. Evenings were no longer consumed by silence and the relentless ping of late-night work emails. They found themselves immersed in a marathon of movies chosen by the boys, engaging in lively debates about pizza toppings, or diving into video games that Alex, despite his lack of skill, relished for the sheer joy it brought to the group. On a Saturday morning, Alex found himself in the kitchen brewing coffee, his ears catching snippets of conversation from the boys in the living room. He hadn't intended to listen in, yet there was something intriguing about their discussion that compelled him to stop and pay attention. "Do you believe this is where we'll settle for the long haul?" Jake inquired, his tone softer than normal. Oliver paused, contemplating his response. "I'm uncertain. I believe that to be the case. He hasn't mentioned anything regarding our departure." Jake let out a heavy breath. "Indeed, but what if he has a change of heart? What if he chooses to distance himself from us?" At those words, a tightness gripped Alex's chest. He had thought that by this point, they recognized his commitment. But the uncertainty in Jake's voice brought to light the possibility that they were still anticipating the moment when everything would unravel once more. They had lived their entire lives experiencing the pain of loss, the absence of stability. It was understandable that they would find it hard to accept that this time was different. As he entered the living room, an immediate hush fell over the two boys, their eyes darting up to meet his gaze as if they had been discovered in the midst of some mischief. He settled into his seat opposite them, placing his coffee mug on the table, and locked eyes with them. "You're staying right here," he declared with conviction. Jake adjusted his position, his gaze dropping to the ground. "You assert that in this moment, but what if the circumstances shift?" "There are no possibilities," Alex interrupted. "I wasn't aware of your existence until now. That wasn't a decision I made. Now that I am aware, I won't simply act as if you are invisible. You are my sons. That remains true even when circumstances are challenging." Oliver examined him intently, as though seeking to ascertain the sincerity of his words. "Even if we stumble occasionally." Alex wore a sly grin. "Particularly when you make mistakes occasionally." Jake let out a soft chuckle, yet there was a hint of brightness in his gaze, as if he was beginning to embrace the idea. That afternoon, they ventured into Central Park. It wasn't a grand, lavish affair, merely a quiet afternoon spent outdoors, yet it carried a sense of significance. Jake held his baseball, tossing it lightly between his hands as they strolled, while Oliver carried his sketchbook snugly under his arm. They meandered along the trails, pausing to observe a troupe of street performers for a time, before ultimately discovering a spacious grassy patch where Jake persuaded Alex to toss the ball back and forth with him. Oliver sat close by, absorbed in his sketching, occasionally lifting his gaze to observe them before returning to his artwork. After a moment, Jake tossed the ball back to Alex, a grin spreading across his face. "Your progress is evident." Alex seized it effortlessly. "I have always been good." Jake wore a sly grin. "That's open to discussion." They continued their playful antics for a bit longer until Oliver eventually lifted his gaze from the page he had been immersed in. "I believe I've reached the end." Jake sprinted forward and glanced back over his shoulder. "Allow me to take a look." Oliver paused for a moment, then flipped the sketchbook around, inviting them to share in the view. The drawing depicted the trio, with Alex positioned centrally, Jake clutching a baseball glove, and Oliver grasping his sketchpad. The intricacy was remarkable, yet it transcended mere aesthetics. It was how Oliver had portrayed their stance, how they seemed to fit perfectly as one. Alex sensed a familiar constriction in his chest. Yet this time, it was neither guilt nor regret that caused it. It was an experience unlike any other, something he felt was beyond naming at this moment. "This is good," Alex remarked, examining the sketch closely. Oliver shrugged, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Thank you." Jake smiled broadly. "I exude confidence." "You always believe you look so cool," Oliver said with a dismissive roll of his eyes. As they strolled back to the car, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow while the distant city lights began to twinkle to life. Upon arriving at the penthouse, the boys dispersed to their respective rooms, leaving Alex momentarily standing in the hallway, absorbing the subtle sounds of their movements. This place no longer felt devoid of life. It wasn't merely a place he occupied. It resonated as a true home. That evening, as Alex occupied his office, he cast a fleeting look at his phone. His calendar remained full, his schedule still rigorous. Yet for the first time in ages, he found his mind drifting away from work. He contemplated their plans for tomorrow, the supplies required for school next week, and whether to enroll Jake in a baseball league or to purchase additional art supplies for Oliver. He found himself lost in thoughts of them. For the first time in his life, that became the most important thing. This narrative delves into more than just the surprise of becoming a father. It explores the profound metamorphosis of a man who has long equated success solely with wealth and influence. Alexander White, a master of control and calculation, confronted the ultimate challenge, embracing a role he had never envisioned for himself, that of a father. The essence of this tale lies not only in the revelation but also in the transformative journey of the protagonist. He fails to grasp at once that children are more than mere obligations. They represent a profound treasure that cannot be purchased or orchestrated. He must venture beyond the confines of his meticulously arranged existence, embrace trust, cultivate care, and, above all, prioritize another over his own needs. The conclusion of this narrative holds significant weight. It is not romanticized. Alexander does not immediately transform into the perfect father. However, he takes the crucial step of choosing to remain, opting not to flee from this new reality but to embrace it, to grow, and to evolve. The essential takeaway is that family isn't a pre-packaged entity. It's a creation that unfolds gradually, shaped by errors, perseverance, and the desire for improvement. This narrative illustrates that genuine richness lies not in financial gain, but in the connections with those who eagerly anticipate your presence. And when Alexander finally comes to the profound realization that his life has transformed irrevocably, he recognizes that he has made the most significant investment of all in family.